All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode number 27 of the Facts Over Feelings podcast. And wow, what a week, Trevor. What a week we just had here. A lot of NFL games this week, a lot of great games, and, a lot of recent NBA news with the draft coming up this upcoming, I believe, Thursday. And a bunch of trades have occurred in just the last 24 hours. It's been a whirlwind of a day, of a Sunday and Monday. And I wanted to start off by talking about the first trade we have on the books here, which is the Oklahoma City Thunder traded Dennis Schroder to the Los Angeles Lakers for Danny Green and a first round pick, which was the 28th pick. So, Trevor, I wanted to start off by asking you, did anyone win this trade? Did anyone lose this trade? What are your thoughts?
hmm Yeah, this is an interesting trade because it's not as blockbuster as some of the other ones, but I do think it's significant. And I like the Lakers here. I really like Dennis Schroeder as a player. We saw what he could do last year in Oklahoma City coming off the bench. He gave them a consistent, 16 or 18 points per game. He was very strong for them in their playoff series against Houston. And he's that guy that, the big question mark with the Lakers is who's going to be the consistent third guy? Is it Kuzma, Rondo? Is it Alex Caruso? Who is it? And there never really was a consistent third presence. However, in the playoffs, I do think Rondo stepped up big time.
Mhm.
I think Schroeder, it's going to be a little bit of a chemistry issue, especially since they do have a guy like Rajon Rondo on that team. LeBron also is a very ball heavy guard for them. So I do think fitting in Schroeder is going to be a little bit of a challenge, but I do think he is huge for them in terms of getting a consistent third guy who can give them consistent production.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. So for me, I mean, I agree with you. This helps the Lakers, and this helps the Lakers because you're right. Dennis Schroeder is a great scorer off the bench. He provides energy off the bench, and that's something that the Lakers, in my opinion, lacked last year outside of Alex Caruso. I think outside of Alex Caruso, you didn't really have a guy that could come off the bench and really provide you with consistent, efficient points. And I think Dennis Schroeder provides that for them, so he fills that hole, and it's great. He averaged 19 points per game last season with the Thunder. He was a sixth man of the year contender. He had 4 assists, and he shot 39% from three. He was a solid scorer, and that was his job, and that's going to be his job in LA. I personally think that the Thunder actually won this deal. While I do think that the Lakers did a good job, they did what they wanted to do. They're going to contend for a title again this year. Dennis Schroeder's a free agent after the season, and for the Thunder to be able to get Danny Green, a guy who is only there for 1 year, but he'll be able to, provide his experience and his leadership to that team, like Chris Paul did when he was there last season. And they got a first round pick. So I think that the Oklahoma City Thunder got yet another first round pick for a guy who was probably going to leave after this year anyway. And I think that that's exactly what you have to do if you're a team like that, and you know you're not going to keep the player if his contract expires. Trade him away, get a first round pick and a veteran piece, and move on. And I think the Thunder did a great job of that. Sam Presti did a great job, and but make no mistake about it, both teams definitely improved because of this trade.
To counter your point a little bit, one, the draft pick is 28, so it's a very
Yep,
low end first round pick.
that's true.
It's not worth all that much in my personal opinion, and I'm not super high on this NBA draft class as is. So that 28th pick to me is not a huge. It is a first round draft pick. It's there. It's an asset. And Danny Green for me is a throwaway player. I mean, we saw what he was last year in the playoffs. He was awful. I mean, he couldn't hit a shot. He's past his prime. For me, it just feels like I feel like the Lakers could have gotten a little bit more for Dennis Schroeder. I feel like they should have asked for someone maybe a little bit more useful. Why not go for Alex Caruso, someone who can do a little bit more and who's a little bit younger than Danny Green? And not to mention, Danny Green is a relatively expensive player. I understand he's probably only going to be there for a
He's got
year. They
1 year
might even
left.
trade him. They might even trade him. You never really know. But for me, it just seemed like they threw away Dennis Schroeder for not enough. I felt like they could have gotten a little more. The first round pick's nice, but it's the 28th pick. So I still think Dennis Schroeder is worth more than Danny Green and the 28th overall pick, but that's just my personal opinion on that.
Okay, that's fair. But I mean, we'll see what happens with that. But moving on, again, we had a lot of trades in the last few days, and Trevor, this was perhaps the biggest trade we've had so far. And it involves your team, the Phoenix Suns. Chris Paul is on the move. He moves from the Oklahoma City Thunder along with I think it's Abdul Nader. Is that his name, Trevor? I don't want to get it
Abdel
wrong.
Nader, yeah,
Yeah,
Abdel
okay.
Nader.
Abdel Nader, sorry. And they go to Phoenix for Kelly Oubre, Ricky Rubio, for a protected 2022 first. And who was the last player, Trevor?
Jalen LeCue and Ty Jerome are both on
Oh,
their way to
And
Oklahoma
Ty
City as
Jerome as
well.
well. Yeah, so this trade, Trevor, if you don't mind, I'm going to give my thoughts on this real quick.
Hmm.
So Trevor and I kind of have a little bit of differing views on this trade. For me, I understand the value of getting Chris Paul. Chris Paul is a top 5 or 6 or 7 at worst point guard in the NBA. He's a very good point guard in this league. He played at a high level last year. He helped the Thunder get to the playoffs, helped them win some playoff series in the playoffs, helped them compete in the playoffs. But the problem is he has 2 years left on his contract. He's getting paid over $40 million in each season, and he's 35 years of age. Now, again, I think that the amount that the Suns gave up was fair. It was fair for Chris Paul, and I have no
Hmm.
problem with that. The issue I have, is I don't think it fits the Phoenix Suns timeline. And I understand people saying, well, the Suns need to build a winning culture. They need to start winning. They need to start making the playoffs and instilling that type of mentality that helps the team build on that and win in the future, which is a fair thing to say. But I think that with the way they're playing or the way they're building, how young they are, you slowly build it up. You continue letting your players gain experience. You sign a couple players in free agency this year. You sign a couple in the loaded free agency class next year, and you move on from that. I think getting a 35-year-old player like Chris Paul, to me, it's a great addition. But I think he's an addition that you make if you're a team like Miami or a team like Milwaukee, a team that's one player away. And speaking of Milwaukee, they did a trade for, I think, a younger, more valuable long-term player. But we'll talk about that later. Um, Point being, I think that Chris Paul is a player you add if you're one piece away from a championship, not if you're trying to get, up to the playoffs. That's just my personal opinion. But Trevor, I know you have a lot to say on this, so go right ahead and
I actually
tell us what you
agree
think.
with your point. I strongly agree with your point on Chris. You added Chris Paul type player to a team that's a championship caliber team now, and I thought Miami was a great example of that.
Mhm.
There's two reasons why, according to my many sources inside the Phoenix Suns, there's two reasons why the Suns did this trade. One, the bubble. We went 8-0 without Kelly Oubre in the bubble. Cam Johnson looked really good. McCall Bridges looked really, really good. And they both play the same position as Kelly Oubre. Mikal Bridges is a better defender than Kelly Oubre. Cam Johnson's a better pure offensive scorer, in my opinion. He's a better pure shooter than Kelly Oubre. I wouldn't say a better scorer, but he might be a better pure shooter than Kelly Oubre. It's close. So I do think Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson will be able to fill that void that Kelly Oubre lost. And outside of Kelly Oubre, we really didn't give up anybody that critical or that young. Ricky Rubio, I mean, 2 years, he's getting $17 million a year. He's an expensive player. He's not young. Jalen LeCue, Ty Jerome showed me absolutely nothing. Ty Jerome, I almost wanted to turn off the screen every time he played basketball for us last year.
Whoa.
So the one asset I'm sad about going is Kelly Oubre. And we have replacements for him who are a little bit younger and a little bit cheaper in Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges. Number two is Devin Booker's tired of losing. Devin Booker's been in this city for 5 years. He's lost year after year after year. He is a superstar caliber player and he wants to win. And the Western Conference is extremely tough. We might not even make the playoffs with this team. I mean, the Western Conference is absolutely loaded this year. We might not make the playoffs, but I think this was a move to appease Devin Booker, to give Devin Booker some hope of winning in the recent future. Do I like the trade? I like it. I don't love it. I really liked Kelly Oubre as a player. I loved what he brought culture-wise, the swag, the coolness factor. And I'm really sad to see him go because I do think he loved being in Phoenix. But look, Chris Paul has that championship pedigree. He has that pedigree that can help develop guys like Ayton and develop guys like Booker and turn them into winners, not just good basketball players. And I ultimately think that's why we did the trade.
Yeah, so Trevor, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
If it was you, would you have done the trade?
Good question. Um, it's tough because I'm
It's
not on
very
the
tough.
inside.
Mhm.
It's tough because I'm not on the inside. So
Yep.
clearly, we think by doing this trade that we can make a push for the playoffs and maybe win a series in the playoffs.
Mhm.
And I think that's the expectation for this year, so at least make the playoffs and contend in the first round. After seeing what Chris Paul did last year for the Thunder, yes, I would have done this trade. And I would have given up Kelly Oubre because I have Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson. I thought what Chris Paul did in Oklahoma City last year was tremendous. His leadership, his clutchness, his ability to, help develop guys like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and other young pieces on that team. So yes, I do think Chris Paul. Yes, I would have done this trade, and I think Chris Paul is going to be a very valuable asset in the locker room as much as he is on the court as well.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, so I wanted to point out two things. First off, I want to point out that I think while Chris Paul did do a lot for the Thunder, and make no mistake about it, he helped them get to the playoffs and helped them win last year when everyone thought they would be a lottery team, even in the bottom end of the lottery. They thought they would
Mm-hmm.
be bad, and then they defied all expectations. I think that you have to remember the coach is extremely, and the overall culture of the organization is extremely important in regards to that, right? Billy Donovan, I think, as I said, I thought he should have won Coach of the Year. I think that that's just important to remember that's just as important in getting players. Eric Spoelstra, for example, in Miami, we've talked about them endlessly about team chemistry and culture, about how they're the epitome of what you should be for an organization that doesn't look like on paper they should be as good as they are. But they turn out to be, they defy expectations and play better than anyone thought they should. Those teams, it's all about the coaching. And I think that it's important that the Suns coaching staff steps up this year. I really do. If you're going to have a guy like Chris Paul come in with Devin Booker, I think it's important that they step up. And I want to say one other thing. And you mentioned the reason Chris Paul came to Phoenix is because of Devin Booker. Isn't that correct? You said Devin Booker wants to win. He's lost every year. And while that's true, I this is an overarching problem in the NBA, in my personal opinion, that in the NBA, these star players threaten their organizations, even when under contract for multiple years, and they say, if you don't allow me to win now and change the entire course of your organization and the future that you were going to build, the vision that you had, change it for me because I'm mad. And I think that's a problem in the NBA. I think it is because it creates a very difficult situation for these GMs. It's like, I have a plan and we're going to contend down the line and we're going to be elite and we're going to build a dynasty for years, which I think Phoenix could do. They could still do. But I think trading a 24-year-old wing player, who wing players are extremely rare in this NBA, quality wing players, they're the most coveted position. I just think that it might come back to bite them a little bit in the long term. And I think a team like Phoenix was playing for the long term. And I think that it's sad that teams have to appease their stars when the stars threaten to leave if they don't start trading for players to win right now. And they have to alter their team's plan. So that's just something that I had to say about that. I feel like that's a little unfair to organizations, and I think that
Mm-hmm.
more power to the Suns. Let's see what they do this year. But
It's a good point. It's a
those are my
good point.
thoughts.
Real quick before we move on to the next trade, it's a
Yeah.
good point. However, I don't know if Devin Booker threat. I don't think Devin Booker threatened the organization.
Yeah.
I just think the Suns. It's a unique position the Suns have been in. They've lost for 10 straight years, and
Mm-hmm.
again, I don't think this trade completely overrides our young team. We
Mm-mm.
gave up, in my opinion, one valuable young asset at a position where we have two players who are very capable of developing into that player and becoming better. Mikal Bridges, I'm very high on him. He is a 3-and-D guy. Cam Johnson, a pure three-point shooter. I am very high on these players. And people forget Cam Johnson was a rookie. Mikal Bridges was in his second year. They are very young. We gave up Ricky Rubio, who isn't young, and we brought in a Hall of Fame caliber Chris Paul. I do think this will take us to the next level. And the next level in terms of for the Phoenix Suns is, instead of being a maybe borderline playoff team, this takes us to becoming a playoff team and a team that can potentially win a first round playoff series. And look, if I'm Devin Booker, I've been losing for 5 straight years. How much longer do you want me to wait to fill out your vision? I mean, what if your vision takes another, 4 years before you start winning? Do you want to waste 10 years of my career before I start winning? No. And he has the right to be a little frustrated that he's been a part of a team that has done nothing for 5 years to give him any kind of help, give him any semblance of teammates around him. And we started to do that. We gave him Ayton. We gave him Monty Williams, who I think is an excellent head coach. And you talked about how good of a coach Billy Donovan is. Monty Williams is right there in terms of coaching. I think Monty Williams is an elite head coach in the
Wow.
making. And I think the timeline's running out for rebuilding. And it's an aggressive move. It's a risky move. But did we really give up that much young talent? Did we blow up the whole roster? No, we gave up
Mm-mm.
Kelly Oubre, which I am sad about, but we have plenty of young talent and a very, very solid young core. And now we're bringing in a Hall of Fame caliber player to help develop that.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. We got definitely two different perspectives, but I think we can both agree like it was definitely an interesting trade to say the least.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, and with that, Trevor,
riveting.
yeah, do we do we want to move on to the next trade here? Here, we'll talk about a trade that just happened, in fact. Just broke before we went live with this podcast here. Jrue Holiday of the New Orleans Pelicans was just traded to the Milwaukee Bucks for Eric Bledsoe. Trevor, correct me if I'm wrong. Eric Bledsoe, George Hill,
hmm
and not one, not two, but three first round picks. I mean, Trevor, just please talk to me. Like, what are your thoughts on this on this trade? What are your initial thoughts?
Um, it's a lot. It's a lot. And Drew Holiday is a very, very good basketball player. Don't get me wrong. He is a excellent on-ball defender. He is a good offensive player. He's also a great leader and a great presence to have in the locker room. However, was he worth Eric Bledsoe, George Hill, and three first-round picks? I wouldn't necessarily say so. That seems like a lot for a guy like Drew Holiday. It feels like my Suns gave up less for Chris Paul, who in my opinion is a better player. But yeah, clearly Milwaukee is going all in on this season. And I do like the three person combo of Drew Holiday, Middleton, and Giannis more than Bledsoe, Middleton, and Giannis. I do think Holiday's an upgrade. It's clear that Milwaukee's in a win this year mentality, or else they're blowing it up. I feel like this is Milwaukee is in the position that the Rockets are in. We're either going to win a championship with the guys we got, or we're going to get rid of all of them. And I think this is going to be the storyline all year: is can Milwaukee break through? I like Drew Holiday. I like the move by New Orleans. I honestly think they won the trade, but the trade makes sense for both teams. The only thing I don't like is three first round picks for Milwaukee is a huge, huge risk, because if this doesn't work and you lose in the second round of the playoffs again, and you end up losing Giannis, losing Middleton, losing Holiday, where's the future? Your next 3 years are gone. You lost three first round picks. So for me, this is an all or nothing type of trade. I like the move. I understand the move. If I had to pick a winner, I'd go with New Orleans because of those three first rounders.
Yeah, so here are my thoughts. There's a couple different ways this trade can go. We have to see how it pans out over the next year or two. Because here's
Mm-hmm.
the thing, Drew Holiday's a great player. He's 30 years old, but he's a high level point guard in this league. He can pass, he can shoot, he can get to the hoop, and he can play pretty good defense. He's not
He
allowed
is
loud. He doesn't speak out, publicly. He doesn't. He's not
very
like
level headed guy.
exactly. Yeah, he's quiet and does his job, and he's a team player. At least it seems like from the public eye. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
point being, I think here's where Milwaukee wins this trade. Milwaukee wins this trade if Giannis signs his 5 year supermax, which it's rumored that he will sign it this upcoming December before the deadline. Which, if he does, this is a win for Milwaukee. Because here's why. If Drew Holiday, he's a free agent after next season. He has a player option for the 2021-2022 season. So then after that, he's a free agent. Chris Middleton, I believe, is a free agent a few years after that. You get Eric Bledsoe's big contract off the books. So worst case scenario, if Giannis signs his supermax, you have a ton of space to get other stars in the 2021 loaded free agent class to pair with Giannis. So that's the worst case scenario, or the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is Giannis doesn't sign Supermax. They don't win a title this year, which is clearly what they're trying to do. They have no future first round picks. Giannis leaves. Drew Holiday declines his player option and leaves, and you're stuck with Chris Middleton for another year or two and no first rounders for the next few years. So there's two very different ways this trade can play out for Milwaukee. I think I agree with you. As of now, New Orleans wins this trade because they got three first round picks. So here, I want to say one thing about this. New Orleans is doing what I think the Suns is doing what I think a team like the Suns should do. And I think they're a year behind the Suns, but my point is they're not they're not trading for any players like on the back ends of their primes or even out of their primes. They're trading for picks, first round picks, young players. This haul they got, Trevor, is comparable to the haul they got for Anthony Davis, for Jrue Holiday. It's unbelievable. So this team has Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson and Jackson Hayes and three future firsts that they just got, plus the first round picks they already have, plus
And Zion Williamson.
plus the picks they got from the Los Angeles Lakers. So I think this team's really well set up for a future dynasty, not even in the sense of winning championships, but in the sense of contending in the playoffs. So great trade by the Pelicans, and it could be a great trade from Milwaukee if the dominoes fall in their favor.
One interesting point you brought up, and you already said it.
Yeah,
You would think Milwaukee, there's no way Milwaukee would do this trade if they didn't have a good feeling that Giannis would resign. Why would
yeah,
they risk their entire future on on a Drew Holiday and Giannis and this season? So this leads me to believe that Giannis might sign that supermax, as you said. But it just seems like I don't know. There's also been other rumors where Giannis seems a little frustrated with Milwaukee, and I'm pretty sure there's been murmurs of Giannis, not telling or not sure of what his future is going to be. So
mm,
it's a big risk. If Giannis signs that supermax in December before the next season starts, then yes, I think Milwaukee's very well set up. But for me, based on what Giannis has said this offseason, based on how this offseason is playing out, why would you sign the next 5 years of your career away, to a team? I mean, it just seems like Giannis isn't in that right mental space to commit to a 5 year
we'll
supermax.
see.
I don't know if this trade changes his mind. It would definitely be something to think about if I were him, but again, it's so much to play out. We'll see in the coming months how this works out, but an
Yeah,
interesting trade again.
yeah, I agree. And before I move on, I just want to say one thing. We'll see what happens with this team, but for some reason, when I think of Milwaukee, I just feel like there's something missing every time. I don't know. Maybe it's just I'm being biased for some reason. Maybe I'm not
Mm-hmm.
seeing it clearly. I just for some reason have this feeling that the Bucks and Giannis is just not going to end well. I just year after year I see them like play so well in the regular season only to just fall short in the playoffs, and I just have a feeling it's going to happen again. So I mean hopefully I'm wrong. I'd love to see Giannis play in a small market and bring some popularity to these small markets like LeBron did in
Mm-hmm.
Cleveland. But I don't know. I if I had to bet right now, I'd put my odds against it. I'd say Giannis will leave, but we'll see what happens, and I hope the best for the Bucks. With that, Trevor, I think we talked about a lot of NBA, and we will talk a lot about the NBA next week as well, with impending free agency, with the NBA draft coming up this week, and more
Mm-hmm.
trades definitely on the horizon. So we will have a lot of NBA to talk about next week. But with that, we can move on to the talk of the country, the NFL. We got a lot of games that happened this week. Both Trevor and I had good weeks. Both of us are happy about our weeks for different reasons. And but the fact of the matter is, both of our teams, the Browns and the Cardinals, are now 6-3 on the season. So Trevor, I wanted to start off though on a little bit of a different note and ask you to start off by talking about one of your games for this week.
Yeah, so the first game I want to talk about was the Sunday night game between the Ravens and the
Mm,
Patriots. Um, this entire NFL podcast portion, I
yeah.
should say, I'm going to be framing my argument all in favor of Kyler Murray. So I specifically picked the Ravens and the Patriots because I
Uh,
wanted to cite some of Lamar Jackson's struggles, and I picked the Seahawks and the Rams as another game to talk about before we get to the main course. But to go with the
uh,
Ravens and the Patriots, this is the concern with Baltimore, and you and I have said it multiple times. If you get out in front of Baltimore, Lamar Jackson has not shown an ability to throw his way back into football games, you know, and and he's a great front runner. He's a perfect quarterback to have as a front runner because if you get out in front, you can just run the ball, pound the ball, kill the clock,
mm.
and and yeah, that's what you do. But when you're losing, like they were yesterday, 23-10 early in the second half against New England, Lamar isn't capable of throwing you out of a deficit. And that is why Baltimore is not going to go to the Super Bowl this year and might not go to the Super Bowl unless Lamar can really develop as a passer. And that's just the struggle that he has. And obviously the center for the Ravens made a couple of huge errors yesterday, a couple of really poor snaps that led to a fourth down, or they got stopped on fourth down because of a bad snap. There was another snap late in the second half that really affected one of their drives. So obviously that was a factor. It was also raining very heavily. I'll take that into account.
Right.
But the big picture is, and this has been the problem with Lamar Jackson, as I've said like 3 times already, if he's losing, he cannot throw his way out of a deficit. As opposed to a guy like Kyler Murray, who was down by 14 in the third quarter yesterday, and by the end of the third quarter had us leading by 3. Just wanted to throw that out there. The Ravens have an issue with Lamar throwing the ball. Good win for the Patriots. Don't give up on New England yet. I think they're gonna come back and be a 7-8 win team this year. I'll hand it off to you though.
Yeah, so I want to talk about this game, but first I want to address this Kyler Murray obsession of sorts. And I wanted to just say, for everyone out there that's like, why is this guy talking about Kyler Murray for MVP? And let me tell you right now, he shouldn't be. Okay, I'll tell you right now, he shouldn't be. And here's why. Okay, Kyler Murray is nowhere near the statute of Patrick Mahomes. He's not even in the same stratosphere as Patrick Mahomes. He turns the ball over at infinitely higher rates, not infinitely, but a lot higher rates than Patrick Mahomes. And he also, while I will say he plays similarly to Russell Wilson, runs more, but plays similarly to Russell Wilson. He's not as good as Russell Wilson. He's not as accurate. He doesn't throw the ball with as much consistency as Russell Wilson. And at the end of the day, Russell Wilson is a better football player, as is Aaron Rodgers, in my opinion. But that's besides the point. We're not going to talk about that all day. I want to talk about this game, and I agree with Trevor. Lamar Jackson, he's regressed this year. Simple as that. We talked about it last week. We've talked about multiple weeks this season on this podcast. He's gotten worse, and it's not really unexpected for players in their second or third seasons to take a step back. I mean, Cam Newton did it with the Panthers. Baker Mayfield did it with the Browns last year. Clearly, a lot of players do it. A lot of players do it. I'm not really surprised. I said Lamar was an average passer at best, and I think I'm right. Lamar is not a guy, Trevor said, he can't throw you out of a deficit, even with his elite defense. I mean, you'd think he would be able to at least, make a drive or two, put a drive or two together to tie the game up. But no,
Mhm.
he couldn't get over the hump against a mediocre Patriots defense. Let's be honest, they have not been good this year, particularly against the run. And it was raining, and they still didn't exploit that. So I'm kind of
Mhm.
confused as to what's up with that. I mean, Lamar did have 55 yards, but that's not what he should be having. And as a team, they only had 60 yards outside of Lamar running the ball. So it wasn't like they really were incredibly efficient or impactful on the ground, which is not good for Baltimore. Baltimore is they have the second most rush yards per game in the NFL, and they had 110 yesterday against the Patriots, which is 55, I believe, under their game average. So that's just not acceptable if you're going to win a game. And yeah, I think that about sums it up. I think Lamar's a little bit, he's just not playing up to expectations this year. And I want to point out one player for the Patriots. Damian Harris. I've mentioned him before. I'll mention him again. This guy is a good player. He can break tackles at the line of scrimmage. He gets yards after contact, and he's evasive. He also has great straight line speed, which running backs need to break off big runs, like Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, Ronald Jones, Aaron Jones, these kind of guys. They need straight line speed, and he has it. So he has a lot of tools that I like in a running back. Keep an eye on him for the rest of the season and in the future as potentially being a really good back for the Patriots.
I agree with a lot of what you just said. I'm gonna have to ignore the Kyler Murray nonsense for a few minutes. We'll get to that a little bit, in a little bit.
Yeah.
I agree with a lot of what you just said, and you have been spot on about Lamar. He has always been an average passer. He's regressed a little bit. I also think defenses have, they have a little bit more film on him now. They've seen him a couple times, so I do think defenses are
Sure.
adapting to Lamar Jackson a little bit. But you're right. There's definitely some holes in his game, and you and I have mentioned it both times. With that being said, Ryan, we're going to go to another
Yeah.
game with a quarterback that we love to talk about his holes in particular. So I'll hand it off to
Okay.
you to talk about the Browns and the Texans.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about this game not just because I'm a Browns fan, but because there's a lot of different things
Well, let's
to
be honest.
there's a lot of things to pick apart in in this game here. And
In a
first,
10-7 riveting football game, yes.
listen, to everyone out there who is insulted and offended by my co-host's disrespect towards the Houston Texans and Cleveland Browns, this game was a fun game to watch. Okay, it was football weather. Okay, Deshaun Watson struggled mightily.
He
I want to
did.
say something. A lot of people, when there's low-scoring games like this, they look at it and they say, "Wow, Baker Mayfield or such and such is not good." Well, how about we look at the opposing side and we look at the quarterback for the Houston Texans? I mean, this guy we can all agree he's elite, but he struggled. I mean, he threw for 163 yards and had a touchdown off of a terrible penalty call that gave them 15 yards and a first down to get into Cleveland territory. Point being, Deshaun Watson had a really bad game, and I don't really put it all on him. I really don't put a lot of it on him. His O line is terrible. It was bad
Hmm.
weather, and he didn't have David Johnson. He didn't have DeAndre Hopkins, as we can see that he really misses him. And the play calling is just abysmal. It's really, really bad. It's really, really, really bad. And I think not everyone realizes how important play calling is. And I just want to point out to everyone how bad the Browns were last year, particularly on offense. That is why they were so bad last year. That's why we've already tied our win total from last year, um, 9 weeks into the season, because we have a new head coach who knows how to effectively play call. He knows how to call the right plays at the right times. Although I will say about the Browns, Kevin Stefanski did struggle to call plays in the first half. He didn't give Baker Mayfield his traditional play action bootleg passes to give him some a moving pocket, to give him some space to work with. So that is why the Browns struggled in the first half. But he knew what to do in the second half, the classic blueprint, and no one can seem to stop it when Chubb is healthy, where you run Nick Chubb early in the second half, then you turn to Kareem in the early to mid fourth quarter, and you run him into the ground, and you bring Chubb back in at the end for the killer punch. It's happened time and time again for the Browns against Washington, against Indy, against Dallas at some points, against Cincinnati. It happens week after week when Chubb is healthy, and I think that that's the identity for the Browns. Just run the ball with those two guys, let them wear down the defense, and that's how you win games. And I also want to point out one thing, Trevor, before I move on. I know I've talked to you about this
Hmm.
outside the podcast, but Nick Chubb, what a team player he is. He on 3rd and 3 on the 40-yard line of the Browns 40-yard line, got the first down, ran all the way, had an easy touchdown. Instead of walking into the end zone with about 35 seconds left, he steps out of bounds at the 1 yard line. He did that so Deshaun Watson couldn't get the ball back, and he had 0% chance to score, to make it even a competitive game at all, or for a player to get hurt on defense or in special teams. So that's just a class act, just a great team player. It just encompasses all of what Nick Chubb is. I just want to point that out because he's just a great teammate to have, great player to have on your team. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. I'll start with the Nick Chubb play. Unbelievable selflessness by him. That's a team player. That's a championship player right there, Nick Chubb. Good for him. And it's ironic you talk about how they've used Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. Both of them were really effective yesterday. Chubb went for 19 for 126, averaged 6.5 yards a carry. Kareem Hunt went 19 for 104, averaged 5.5 yards a carry. It's almost like every time we talk about the Browns, I've said it on this podcast 50 times. The Browns offense runs through their two running backs, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And that is exactly what happened yesterday. They both ran all over that Houston defense, particularly in the second half. It was windy, whatever. I don't want to hear the excuses. Baker Mayfield was very unimpressive. He missed a lot of throws yesterday, in my opinion. I actually watched this game pretty closely. There was a third down play where he was rolling out to his left, completely missed Kareem Hunt, threw it way behind him. On the ensuing fourth down play, Jarvis Landry was open deep down the field, threw it way over his head. I thought Mayfield was very off yesterday, was very unimpressive. And look,
Mm-hmm.
Cleveland won this game because they have two elite running backs, and Houston is just horrendous. This win does nothing for me for Baker. It does nothing for me for Cleveland. It's a solid win because you beat an NFL team. And look, good for Kevin Stefanski, but no offense, it's obvious. Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt are just elite. You need to feed them the ball as much as you can. There's a reason why Baker Mayfield only threw 20 passes yesterday, and they called 38 run plays for Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. It's because those are your true offensive weapons. And I don't want to hate on Baker Mayfield because I do it almost every podcast, but the Browns are predictable. If they can't run the ball, they can't win the football game. If they play a good team, they can't win a game. So they beat a bad Houston team barely. They ran all over them.
Mm-hmm.
Baker Mayfield did nothing. It was a typical Cleveland win. They're 6-3. I'm happy for
Yeah, so we can move on from this game in just 1 second. I just want to say one thing. I think
them.
I think it's important to realize that for every bad play that Baker Mayfield had on Sunday, he had a good play. I think Trevor's neglecting to tell the audience here that on a 3rd and 18, Baker Mayfield threw an
Was a good throw.
absolute strike to Rashard Higgins on the right-hand side of the field, the
Good
right
throw.
sideline for a first down. That ended up leading to the Browns' only touchdown of the game. So that drive, I mean, that play, extremely important. Baker didn't have to do much. The weather was terrible, and I think that reflects in Deshaun Watson's poor stat line. I think that to say Deshaun Watson and Baker Mayfield played that badly, I think is just a reflection both. I mean, sure, you can say there's other circumstances that surround it, but the weather was just it was a factor.
Hmm.
Simple as that.
Hmm.
And running the ball in bad weather is easier and more effective than throwing the football. And I'm fine with that. Now, I will say I want to see more. I want to see more throwing from Baker Mayfield. I want Kevin Stefanski to let him roll out of the pocket more, get some more throws out to his tight ends and receivers across the middle of the field. So I'd like to see more of that, especially against the Eagles next week, a team that we should beat. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. We can move on to the next game we have on the slate. Trevor, go right ahead and
The
get us.
Seahawks and the Rams, another NFC West battle. And this is interesting. As I've mentioned already, Russell Wilson's been a topic of conversation in terms of my argument for Kyler. And he looked pretty pedestrian yesterday. He threw 2 picks. They only scored 16 points. He did not look very good at all. 31 QBR, 57 quarterback rating. That's pretty low, a lot lower than Jared Goff's
Mm,
QBR and quarterback ratings.
mm.
And if I'm Seattle, I'm very concerned because
Uh,
I'm not concerned about Russell Wilson per se, but I'm concerned that if Russell Wilson doesn't play an elite football game, I can't win. If Russell Wilson doesn't play a perfect game where he has no turnovers, throws 4 touchdowns, throws for 400 yards, I can't win. Their defense isn't good enough, as evident yesterday. Their defense really wasn't that good in the first half against the Rams. And Russell Wilson made a couple of mistakes, and they weren't able to make up for it. I also want to compliment the Rams because the Rams have exceeded a lot of people's expectations. And a lot of people thought they could be the last place team in this division. And honestly, as of right now, if they can get Jared Goff to play like he did yesterday consistently, just not turn the ball over, not make mistakes, make enough throws, the Rams might be the best team in this division. I think they're the most complete team. I think they have the best
mm.
defense between the Cardinals, Seahawks, and the Rams. They have good weapons on the outside. They have Robert Woods. They have Cooper Kupp. They have Josh Reynolds, who had a very good game yesterday. Tyler Higbee had a solid game yesterday. And they have some solid running backs: Cam Akers, Malcolm Brown, Darrell Henderson Jr. So I think the weapons are there for the Rams. I think their defense has been a lot better than people expected. Aaron Donald has been fantastic. Jalen Ramsey, good signing for them. So I do want to give the Rams a lot of credit. Russell Wilson all of a sudden has thrown 10 interceptions this year. Just wanted to point that out, that is 2 more interceptions than one Kyler Murray. Oh, I apologize for that. So yeah, that's all I have to say about this game. And Ryan, I will hand it to you. What is going on with Seattle? They've lost 2 of their last 3. They got
Yeah,
a big game on Thursday night.
so in regards to this Russell Wilson talk, I just want to say that Russell Wilson's still better than Kyler Murray. They both have turned the ball over. They both have double-digit turnovers on the season. Kyler Murray has 10 turnovers. Let everyone know that. Russell Wilson, I believe, has 13. I believe he has 10 picks and 3 fumbles. I could be wrong on that number,
That's
but
oof. That's a
they
lot.
both they both turn the ball over at high rates this year, which is concerning for both of them. Which is concerning for both of them. It is concerning for both teams, and I think it'll be what holds both teams back. Here's why I think it'll hold the Seahawks back less. Because the Seattle Seahawks, I trust Russell Wilson to take care of the ball more when it matters most than I do Kyler Murray. Why do I trust him more? Because he's a 7-year veteran in this league. Because he should have been and gotten MVP votes in past years. Because he is a perennial Pro Bowler. Has gone to the Super Bowl. He's won the Super Bowl. I trust him more with the football in close games. So that's why I think Russell Wilson's still better. But in regards to this game, I want to say he looked really bad. And this is the second straight week now he's looked really off. And it's very strange. No touchdowns this week, 2 picks and a fumble. Not at all like the Russell Wilson we saw in the first
Mm-hmm.
6 or 7 weeks of the season. I mean, ever since that game where the Cardinals beat the Seahawks, I'd argue that he hasn't quite looked the same. I'd argue he's looked like a different player. And it's strange to me. I think it's because that teams are blitzing Russell Wilson at higher rates than they were in the first 5 or 6 weeks, and that's throwing him off. Now, why is that throwing him off? The offensive line is terrible. It's been terrible
It
for
is
years.
terrible.
It's still bad, and it's a problem the Seahawks have just neglected to address. They fail to address because Russell Wilson can get away from the pressure, and they rely on that. Well, that's not good enough anymore. They need to address the O line or the D line. One of the two lines. Neither lines have any exceptional players on them. I mean, they got Carlos Dunlap. Great. What did he do? What did he do on Sunday? Did I see him sacking Jared Goff left and right? No, I did not. So I think that's a worry for me. I think that's concerning. I mean, when Jamal Adams has both of your sacks on Sunday, I think that's a problem. Your D line generated 0 sacks, really, and the safety had 2. So there's a lot of issues with this team. Russell Wilson will carry them, and he's done time and time again. And thank goodness for him for that team because I feel really bad for a lot of these guys on this team, a lot of the fans because like without Russell Wilson, my gosh, this team would be really, really, really bad. And I want to say one more thing: Jalen Ramsey is the best corner in the NFL. I'm sorry, I have to say it. I have to say it right now. This guy
Okay.
has locked down players week after week, and this is part of the why the Rams defense is so good. He gets on their best receiver, he shadows them mostly for most of the game. When he was on DK Metcalf on Sunday, DK Metcalf had 2 targets, 0 catches against Jalen Ramsey. I mean, this guy locked down one of the best receivers in the NFL. Everyone was saying, wow, this guy's the next big thing. And he is. But Jalen Ramsey, wow. I mean, this guy, I just want to say it was worth the money. And this is why the Rams defense is so good. You said they're the best defense in the division. I agree with you with a banged up 49ers team. I agree
Hmm.
with you. And Jalen Ramsey's a big, big part of the reason why.
I agree with a lot of what you just said, particularly about Jalen Ramsey. He has been fantastic. And Aaron Donald, I don't even know if Aaron Donald played yesterday because it says he recorded 0 tackles. So I'm not sure if he played or not yesterday. And that just shows you the Rams are deep. Leonard Floyd, he had 3 sacks yesterday. Terrell Lewis, 2 sacks. John Johnson, 8 tackles. You mentioned Jalen Ramsey, absolutely locking down DK Metcalf. Good on them. And you're right. Russell Wilson got sacked 6 times yesterday. That O line is bad. They're blitzing a lot more. And that's the blueprint to beat Seattle. Get in Russell Wilson's face and lock down DK Metcalf because they don't have the defense to keep them in the game. And they don't have what is going on. I am very sorry about that. They don't have enough oomph outside of Russell Wilson. If Russell Wilson is
Yep.
not playing elite, they can't win.
Hmm.
And that's just not a blueprint to win a Super Bowl. That's putting too much pressure on one guy. But that is enough on the Seahawks and the Rams.
Yep.
Ryan, I'm gonna throw it back to you to talk about your actually, all right, changing the slate up just a little bit. We're going to get to the meat and potatoes. I'm sure we're going to spend a few minutes talking about
Yes.
this game. A couple weeks ago, I said the Seahawks and the Cardinals were the game of the year.
Mm.
The Bills and the Cardinals are now the new number one game of the year. The DeAndre Hopkins, Kyler Murray, Hail Murray, however you want to call
Oh
it.
my gosh.
It puts a smile to my face just thinking about it. I have so much to say here, but I'm gonna have Ryan
Oh
discuss this
man.
one first. Ryan, go ahead, take it away before I go off on you.
What to talk about? Where to start with this game? Where to start with this game?
For real though,
I
for
I, I
real.
have a few things I want to say. First off, Josh Allen is overrated. I'm sorry. I don't want to hear anything else. I think he's an overrated player. Trevor, you can account for this. I'm sure you watched the entire game. I was slipping back
Every
and
play,
forth.
yeah.
I was slipping back and forth between a bunch of games. From what I saw, he was missing receivers like a fair amount. In my personal opinion, he was overthrowing, he was just missing guys. I remember a perfect example. He throws the ball out to the flat to Cole Beasley on a 3rd and 4. Cole Beasley makes an insane grab,
Miraculous catch, great
one-handed
catch.
for the first down. I mean, it was just a perfect example of Josh Allen to me. And Josh Allen's a good quarterback, don't get me wrong. I just think that he has accuracy issues, and they consistently come back to bite him. And they come back to bite him in big moments. And luckily, his receivers, for the most part, made plays to mask that. But it's still a problem, and I don't want people to forget that. Next thing, this run game for the Buffalo Bills is a real, real, real problem. It's non-existent these past few weeks. This week, no exception. Josh Allen was the leading rusher with 38 yards. Outside of Josh Allen, they had, I believe, they had 35 rushing yards outside of him, which is just terrible. They threw the ball 49 times, 50 times actually, which I again find that really weird. I don't like that. I think you need a more balanced approach no matter what team you are. Maybe if you're the Chiefs, it's okay. But outside of that, I think you need a more balanced approach, and I think they need to fix that. And that's probably a bit part of the reason why I mean, they couldn't get over the hump here. But really, the big thing was the end of this game. Stephon Diggs made a great catch. Josh Allen, great throw. I thought the game
Mm-hmm.
was over. I was talking to some friends. I said, "Wow, well the Cardinals got to work on stuff for next week." I was texting Trevor. We said, "Wow, Cliff Kingsbury, he needs to learn from his mistakes in this game, and he still does." But the point is, they pulled it out at the end. I mean, simply what a play. I mean, that's all I have to say. I wish the stadium was packed. I wish it wasn't a COVID limited year.
Mm-hmm.
At
Me
least there were
too.
some, at least there were some fans in the stadium to appreciate it. But you'd always like to have the massive roar of the crowd in those moments. What a catch by DeAndre Hopkins. That's all I have to say. I mean, if you put that on Kyler Murray, if you say Kyler Murray made that play, I can't, I don't know what to tell you. That was all DeAndre Hopkins, 100%, 100%. And just seriously, what a play! I don't have any other words. Great play. It kept the Cardinals at the top of their division and right in the thick of things.
The throw by Kyler Murray was great. Don't get it wrong. He's rolling out to his left. The ball has to go 50. The ball has to travel 55 yards in the air. It was a great throw. But you are 100% correct. The catch by DeAndre
Yeah.
Hopkins was one of the greatest catches in the history of the NFL. I said that right. The history of the NFL. That is up there with the Odell Beckham one-handed grab a few years back.
Okay.
And that Hail Mary is up there with one of the greatest regular season plays in NFL history. Let's break this Hail Mary down real quick because you covered the rest of the game pretty accurately.
Yeah.
Josh Allen, he made some plays. He made a good throw to Diggs. He made a lot of
Sure.
mistakes. There was a couple
Yep.
other plays that should have been picked off in that game. Um, I will say this: the Bills did a pretty good job on Kyler Murray most of the afternoon. They did what they could. You can't slow down an unbelievable player like that, but they did their best and they contained him pretty well. Let's break down this Hail Mary. One, there's 11 seconds left. In my mind and a lot of people's minds, the Cardinals had 2 plays left. They were going to try and get maybe 10 more yards, run out of bounds to get a little bit closer to the end zone, and then throw the Hail Mary. So here's what happened, and here's why I think this play worked out exactly as it did. The Buffalo Bills, and this is a coaching error on Sean McDermott, the Buffalo Bills should have called timeout. They should have called timeout. They should have just figured things out, and they should have just sent out their Hail Mary defense onto the field. You know, I thought that was a poor coaching job by Sean McDermott. I thought, with 2 timeouts left, you should take a timeout, gather the guys, make sure you know your job, make sure you know what to do, and let's get in the right formation. So obviously, the Buffalo Bills were not in Hail Mary formation because you would have specific players out there on the field around the goal line, your jump ball players, your tallest receivers, your tallest whatever, to bat the ball down. And that leads me into my second point. Why are Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer, and who is the third guy? Micah Hyde trying to catch that ball? That is completely inexcusable. Hail Mary 101. Never, ever go for the interception. Bat the ball down. Bat it away. Hit it out of bounds. Do what you got to do. Never go for the interception. You risk a tip or you risk a play where DeAndre Hopkins just high points the ball and has the strongest hands in the world and holds on to it. Terrible Hail Mary defense by the Bills. But let's be real here. And I said it already. That was one of the greatest catches in NFL history. The ability, getting pulled, getting pushed, getting shoved, 3 guys surrounding you at all angles, high pointing the ball. And people forget how hard it is to time that jump. That ball is coming from 55 yards away, as I mentioned. You have to time that jump absolutely perfectly, or else that play does not work. After he times the jump, high points the ball perfectly, and still has to reel it in. He still has to bring it into his body and hold on to the catch. He somehow does all those things. We escape with a game that we shouldn't have won, but we should have won, and then we shouldn't have won. And it was just an unbelievable play by DeAndre Hopkins. And I want to talk a little bit about Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray is the second most valuable player in the NFL. I've been waiting to say this the entire podcast. Kyler Murray is the second most valuable player in the NFL to Patrick Mahomes. I can't argue that he is ahead of Patrick Mahomes. There's no basis for that. However, there is a basis for him to be ahead of guys like Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. And yesterday's game proved why. even with the Buffalo Bills, many analysts, I watched the post-game analysis, ESPN, NBC, they said the Bills did a great job. They said you did what you could on Kyler Murray. And you know what? He still put up 32 points on an off game. He threw for 250 yards and a touchdown, also ran for 61 yards and two touchdowns on an off game. Kyler Murray is the second most unstoppable player in the NFL. The stats back it up. He is the best dual threat quarterback in the NFL. He has 10 rushing touchdowns on the season. That is, I believe, a franchise record for the Arizona Cardinals. And there's still 7 games left. Kyler Murray is as close to the usage rate for Kyler Murray is so high because of how reliant we are on his ground game now and on his legs. And his ability to escape the pocket and get that throw off and get it all the way to the end zone is an excellent play as well. I'm a little biased, obviously, but this was just a fantastic game all around. And huge Thursday night game. We're on top of the division, but we got to go to Seattle and beat those damn Seahawks one more time. But yeah, just a great game. Puts a smile to my face. Ryan, I'm sure you have a little bit to say before we wrap up the podcast.
Yeah, so Trevor, if you don't mind, I'm going to take the final word for this podcast here, and I'm just going to say, here's why Aaron Rodgers I already said why Russell Wilson's better. Here's why Aaron Rodgers is better this year. The Green Bay Packers almost lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Isn't that right, Trevor? They almost lost this week. They almost lost on Sunday
You're making my argument.
to a bad
Appreciate it.
team. You could say I'm making your argument, but I'm actually disagreeing with you, and here's why. How did Kyler Murray play against a 3-7 Panthers team? How did Kyler Murray play against a below 500 Detroit Lions team?
He
My
played
point,
good.
he had 3 interceptions in that game. If you're talking about that game, my point being, is a mark of a top tier MVP caliber player is consistency. And what does Aaron Rodgers exude? What does he do best? He's consistent. He wins games that he is supposed to win. Very, very rarely does an Aaron Rodgers led team lose games to bad teams. He wins the games he's supposed to win. And that's the mark of a most valuable player in my eyes. When the team would be horrible without you, which the Packers would be, they would not be good without Aaron Rodgers.
Would the Cardinals be
And
good without Kyler Murray?
I think that the difference between Aaron Rodgers leaving the Packers and the Kyler Murray leaving the Cardinals, I think there's a little bit of a bigger gap, a little bit of a bigger gap. That's
We'll agree to
mostly
disagree on that
that
one.
that's mostly because I think that the Packers have neglected to help Aaron Rodgers at the skill positions. Of course, you have Aaron Jones. Of course, you have Devontae Adams. But we've talked about this. They haven't drafted a first round wide receiver in years, in all of Aaron Rodgers' career. And
Mm-hmm.
this guy still puts up insane numbers and wins games. I just think at the end of the day, a guy turning the ball over as much as Kyler. Kyler's a great player. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to come off as like a Kyler hater of some sort. He's a great player. He's going to be
Mm-hmm.
a great quarterback in this league. He's proven it this year. They might make the playoffs. Even if they don't, they're still going to go above 500 probably and going to be a good team. I have no doubts about it. But
Mm-hmm.
I want people to be careful in saying that he's uh, the most definitive second best player in the NFL this year, only because he turns the ball over at times. He makes some crucial mistakes. He's not always super accurate with the football, and I think that's the difference between guys like him and Aaron Rodgers. And I think Russell Wilson's just a more experienced version of Kyler Murray. I think that they've both had very similar years this year. And I think you can make an argument for either one of those guys at this moment in time. Um, but
Yeah.
you know,
No, it's a good final word. We could talk about this
we
for
could, we
hours. We
could, yeah.
could. And there's so much to talk about. There's a lot to say. I'm going to get the last word in because that's what I do. Kyler Murray beat Russell Wilson head to head. Just wanted to throw that out there. Anyways,
Rematch on Thursday.
we'll see. Yeah, we'll see you again on Thursday.
Yeah.
But yeah, that will just about wrap up the
Mm-hmm.
podcast.
Yes, it will.
What a podcast that was. What a great week of sports.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say one final thing, and we actually haven't mentioned it all. I want to give a huge shout out to Dustin Johnson on winning the 2020 Masters
Thank you.
in a historic performance. The first ever player to get to minus 20 at Augusta National. He put 4 flawless rounds together. He was far and away the best player this week. And it was really nice to see and very, warming, heart moving to see how emotional he was getting interviewed and how much it meant to him to win that green jacket. And Ryan and I are pretty big golf fans. We love playing golf back home in Phoenix, Arizona. And for us, that was pretty cool to see. And a huge shout out to Dustin Johnson. He played unbelievable. Still would have loved to see Tiger Woods win again, but hey, Dustin Johnson completely earned that. Pretty much led wire to wire after the second round and was just absolutely fantastic. So wanted to throw that in there at the end of the podcast. Ryan, if you don't have any more thoughts, I guess that's it for the week. But I'll hand it
Yeah,
to you to
no, no,
finish it up.
that just about does it. Trevor got the final word in, and I agree with it. Dustin Johnson, great Masters win. Tiger Woods, I'm okay with him not winning this year only because I want to see him there back with the full crowd next year. I want to see him back there with all the fans. It's just
In April.
he provides a sort of electricity. Yeah, hopefully they will have most of the fans there with a vaccine coming out in the very near future. And it would be awesome just because Tiger makes those tournaments with the fans. It's just an
Mm-hmm.
electricity like no other. So yeah, great. Thank you, Trevor, for pointing that out, the Masters. I'm sorry we didn't have the time to talk about that this week. We just had so much NBA and NFL talk. But yeah, with that, we're gonna end this podcast. We will be back next week with post-draft talk for the NBA, more NBA trades, NBA news, NBA free agency looming, and NFL talk. So with that, Trevor, we're gonna conclude this podcast, and we'll be back next week